Hello, everybody. Neil, can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me, Neil? All right. So, everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you, Neil, for coming as well. So, give everybody kind of a brief description. If you click up top in the Neil Sanders AMA text channel, you will see Neil's info, and I'm going to go ahead and post it again so everybody can see it. That includes not only his website, but also weird. Oops. Well, you get the idea. But anyway, also the Amazon to his book, which is Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own. Now, before we get started, Neil's going to go ahead and give everybody a little bit of background about himself, kind of what made him write the book and his other book, and just maybe a little bit of background about how he got started, adolescent, college, and so on. So I'm going to hand it off to Neil. Neil, the floor is yours. After that, we'll get started right on the questions.
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in conspiracy theories. To be quite honest, the assassination of Kennedy and John Lennon and that type of thing. Basically, when I was at university, I was studying psychology, but there was also like semesters in advertising, and there's quite a lot of bleed through in between those two topics. Like the use of sort of archetypes in the sale of products, or the use of like appealing to the reptilian brain, that type of thing. And there's a huge amount of bleed through from that into public relations, and from that into politics, and into celebrity. Found the whole thing quite interesting. But when I started sort of finding out about mind control, reading about by the film The Manchurian Candidate, which is obviously it's fiction, but that sort of piqued an interest because that particular film opened up of different types of things that had not been experienced before, like for example a false flag operation using sort of a friendly agent to commit an atrocity, seemingly for another purpose. And this just sort of piqued my interest, so I started reading all the books about it, and discovered that there's quite a lot of in the mainstream about the use of mind control. Mind control basically breaks down into four categories, which would be truth serums, the ability to stop truth serums, thoughts or actions, and then a broader category of propaganda or systematic control of civilization, or a domestic population, or even a foreign population, to be quite honest. And that's done through the dissemination of or the suppression or the manipulation of information as well, to be quite honest. So that's how I kind of got into this, just through being like a hobbyist almost, and just being quite interested in this. And then through whatever circumstances, somebody asked me to be on a radio show, somebody asked me to be on a TV show, somebody asked me to be on this, and I thought, you know what, I need to write a book, or write all this down, so that I've got something to actually refer back to. And that's essentially what I did. So and then many months later, I was finally invited onto this.
All right. Well, you ready for the first question? Can you hear me?
I
I think I'm lagging. Can you hear me?
Just pinging off and on for some reason.
Um, are you ready for the first question?
He's lagging.
Yeah, I think you're lagging, man. Don't think it's me. But
I can do to sort it out.
I would say move your computer around a little bit. Probably your best bet. But I think you're okay. I'm gonna ask the question if you can hear me. It's actually Discord. They posted that they are having some connection stuff and they're rolling out an update. So we may run into that.
No worries.
But
that's what they say. Really?
Yeah, right. It's Discord being mind controlled. All right. So the first question is, hold on one sec. I just had it, but it's all right.
It's a Noam Chomsky one.
Yeah. Would you draw parallels with your beliefs in mind control and the beliefs of Noam Chomsky in manufacturing consent, i.e., the belief that corporations and governments control how we think from a young age?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the phrase comes from I always forget which one was which, but basically Edward Bernays, who's essentially the father of the founder of advertising, and along with Ivy Lee, the first manipulator of the press release, and the concept of planting a story that is essentially an advert but sold to you as news. And Walter Lippmann, who was an intellectual that basically advised presidents. They had the concept of engineering or manufacturing consent, and what this essentially means is setting the norms of society by these streams of knowledge via authority figures, via education, or the aristocratic class, or the royals, or any system of society that is basically definition of society top down. The main point of this was taken from Walter Lippmann, which was in his book Public Opinion. He said that the best way to shape people's mind and shape people's actions is to affect their thoughts. And the way to do this is because most people get all their knowledge from an informed source. Like, you might not have seen a panda, but you've maybe somebody else has seen it, or you've seen a picture of a panda, or nobody's really probably met a terrorist, but you've heard a report of a terrorist from an informed source, probably from an authoritarian source. And what Walter Lippmann basically said was, if we can paint the pictures inside people's heads, we control them, because we can in a stimuli response type experiment, we can basically engineer their response and their actions that are deemed to be normal within society. And basically, both of these people were, and numerous people who are engineers of the ways that civilization run, have a very class-centric ideology that basically means that they feel that the majority of people should not be in society. They should be, at very most, spectators. They shouldn't be involved at any level in the organization of, or the running of society. And they'll pass this off as a sort of, this is a benevolence, because basically the mass, the herd, the braying sort of like sea of incompetence just don't have the mental capacity to actually deal with these complicated issues like running a society. A more cynical mind, I guess, that basically to maintain the status quo, and the status quo essentially being the people who are at the top of the pile being at the very top of the pile. In regards to Noam Chomsky, he was very astute in pointing out that basically there are systematic means through which information is controlled through the media, through even something that's seemingly as trite as the promotion of a certain celebrity or the promotion of a certain charitable cause. And this has been discussed by numerous incredibly, like, revered journalists, Carl Bernstein for one, and Noam Chomsky, John Pilger, numerous other very, very, very highly regarded people have actually pointed out that there is a serious problem in the flow of information and the control of information, not only about domestic issues, but also international issues. That is governments. I mean, all governments have got a department which by vet news. They can put, for example, in the UK, they can put something on stories which is called a D notice, which basically means that you're not allowed to talk about this. Often they'll use the excuse of for national security, and you know what? There may well be instances where this is entirely proper, but it is also an incredibly useful tactic for information from the general public that is not conversive to the running of a happy state, and that is the point. Civilization is complicated. You need to distract people. You need to give people aspirations and things to worry about and things to be considered about. I mean, look at what's recently happened with the Panama Papers, right? Okay, and the Paradise Papers. This is like solid gold evidence of an elitist class treating the general public like dirt, using their money in offshore accounts, and going against the exact principles that they basically rain down on the poorest members of society. You should pay tax. You should give this to society. You should be of some importance and give back. And at the very time, the people who are essentially raping the public of their money and stealing the assets generationally, I might add, have the gall and the nerve to be involved in these incredibly dodgy and probably illegal practices of tax evasion, which is, it's just despicable. It's hypocrisy at the greatest level. But that is the key mechanism of controlling society. Like, I mean, Trump's done it in a masterful way. Come here, everybody. I'm just like you. You know what's wrong with your life? You know who's to blame for your life? Yeah, those guys. Like, it's a divide and conquer tactic, and it's a use of people with a circular argument that can never be answered, because that's not the answer to the question that they're asking. And so, yes, I would agree absolutely that there are complete mechanisms of control, the manufacture of consent, and that particular resource, the Noam Chomsky book, is an excellent book to read on that subject.
All right, great answer and great question, Subs. All right, next question comes from Tomo, and it is, what are your thoughts about estrogen in foods, drinks, soda, etc.? Does it affect us as a populace total? And does the amount of estrogen or any other chemicals in beer and milk and other items affect free thought of the consumer?
I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really answer with any sort of authority on the fact. Oh, look at that, appeal to authority already. But there's a lot of misnomers about this. I would suggest that it's of course a bad idea to pump any type of chemicals into things. And there's all sorts of things like bovine growth hormone that the Monsanto pumps into beef, and all this sorts of, like, I mean, one of the main sort of arguments that people are concerned about surrounding England or the UK, or I don't know what it's called, leaving the EU. They won't be subject to the EU food laws, and so basically we'll get a lot of the same sort of food that comes out of America, and the sort of the levels of control on that, and the chemicals and such that can go into it is incredibly different, and probably not safe. One of the main arguments about this is the person that asked this question is saying this, but there is a sort of common meme or that's bounding around, which is promoted by people like Alex Jones, which is like, oh, the chemicals in the water are turning the freaking frogs gay. And there's often a study that's cited that is talking about fish changing sex, and essentially Alex Jones was incorrect. It's not saying frogs gay. There was reported instances of frogs changing sex from male to female. And this is one of those things that on the face of it sounds very, very concerning. And again, I will reiterate that I don't think it's a good idea to be pumping any of this crap into water or water tables, or putting it into food, or having these things in plastics and stuff like that. I'm sure it's incredibly harmful, but there's a lot of disinfo on that. And the problem with those particular examples is that the frogs and the fish tend to change sex anyway in natural environments. So that's a bit of a misnomer on that particular argument. But in a general sense, is it wrong to be pumping all these harmful or these chemicals and bodily extracts, etc., into the water system and into the food system? I wouldn't have thought so. I don't suspect that it's a terribly good idea.
All right, great.
That I'm a bit limited on it, I'm afraid.
No, that's okay. That's a good answer. Next question comes from me. So, can you kind of go on about the school shootings? And I've read quite a bit about how you relate to that. Some of your books do, and how mind control relates to that.
I mean, obviously, a lot of it is speculation, but essentially, the premise being that in a lot of the school shootings, particularly the more prevalent ones that were in the popularized by the news media, that there's a lot of in the official story to the actual evidence that was placed on scene. I mean, one of the just off the top of my head, during Columbine, it was reported that there were bombs left around the building by Kibbold and Harris. One of the things that was initially reported and was repeated many times and was sourced by a couple of official sources, one of them I believe was the FBI, was that these bombs that were left around the buildings, they had incredibly sophisticated switches, like military grade switches, like the sort of things that shouldn't have been in the possession of these kids. And even if they were in the possession of these kids, wouldn't really, they shouldn't have had the knowledge to be able to deal with this particular sophisticated equipment. In instances like Virginia Tech, there's like the number people have reported seeing like two shooters, or reporting of the person who was doing the shooting having a very, very different description from the supposed actual assailant. Now, obviously, there is basically a problem with people's memory, and people getting caught up in the moment. But there's a lot of discrepancies. Now, as to whether mind control was involved in any of these instances, again, a lot of it is speculation, because nobody's going to come out and say yes, this person was involved. But what you tend to see is that people tangentially connected or directly connected to weapons manufacturing companies, or other organizations with a connection to government organizations that have in the past been involved in mind control programs. Descriptions of the shooters being robotic, not responding to friends and family and stuff like that. Again, this could be passed off by mental illness or that type of thing. It's more, again, the sort of similarities that run through them. Like, I'm not of the opinion that absolutely every single shooting is mind control. I'm not even of the opinion that every single shooting is a government tactic. I think that there's serious problems that are going on for some reason with shootings in America. whether again that you could it depends how broadly you want to make an argument to this. Like, the entire sort of culture of guns, machismo, not just in America, and in the entirety of Western society, probably the entirety of the world, okay, leads people into a position where they feel aggrieved, and might, in an incredibly extreme way, to get back some sort of power. You could make an argument that there's all sorts of things that are prevalent to make life chaos. So one thing that's a fact. El Chapo was basically given carte blanche to move whatever he wanted into Chicago for a very, very long time. And the premise of this given by the ATF and the FBI was that basically he was giving valuable information against other cartels, rival cartels. And so this was a sort of quid pro quo type thing. It is very, very sinister that basically off the back of this, you've got sort of the situation that you do have in Chicago at the minute, and increased violence there. I think that a lot of the application of violence and the sort of promotion and, in a sense, celebration of violence by the news media in the way that they sensationalize it, I think that is certainly part of a mind control program that creates two things. It creates fear and it creates chaos. Okay, it hardens and it terrifies, depending on the type of person that you are. Basically, when there's a school shooting, that, oh my God, they're coming for our guns and stuff like that. I don't think that's the case. I think if you actually look at the statistics and the facts behind it, every time there's a school shooting, gun sales go through the roof. Okay, and so perhaps there's a slightly different tactic that's going on. Perhaps they want a lot of guns in society because they want people to kill people, and they sensationalize these school shootings because basically this heightens people's fear, and so they want to protect their families in a rational sense, and so they buy what they think is the best protector for them, which is guns. Then I mean, statistics show that I mean, I don't get me wrong, like, I used to be part of a gun club. I'm not like anti-gun by any stretch of the imagination, but there are interesting discussions or arguments to be had around all of these things.
Yeah, no, great answer. Next question is, do you think people of power are aware and actively using these methods?
Absolutely, and some aren't. And an example of that, it depends what you mean by people in power. An example of like utilization of mind control techniques. Like, let's, like, on a very low level, yes, of course they're using propaganda and lies and deception and PR and marketing, which is of course a form of mind control. If you want to get into the sci-fi stuff, like, which is stuff like silent sound. They admitted that they used silent sound during the first incursion into Iraq in 1991. Silent sound is a system which, by basically, it can do a couple of things. It can either put messages into people's heads, which essentially act like a sort of schizophrenia, like an auditory hallucination, or it can basically induce an emotion, a feeling of, in this particular instance, terror. And by a couple of generals, then later denied by the military, and then later admitted by the company that actually provided the technology to the military during the campaign. And basically what this was, it was like a speaker setup system, and it just pumped noise, seemingly meaningless noise, at the Iraqi troops. This were mind control signals that basically induced a sense of terror and desperation. And this is why you saw those hundreds of troops basically surrendering en masse. There's reports of like 5-star generals surrendering entire platoons to remote control, like airplanes with like cameras on them and stuff like that. This is not, again, to detriment the people that were over there, that I'm sure were very, very brave, but this is admitted that a technology like that was actually used. This has been discussed in Parliament in Russia. Like, basically, mind control technology is one of these things that in Russia is kind of more sort of open. I mean, they did get caught in the the mid 60s using mind control programming. It was more sort of like psychotronic technology, which is like microwave weaponry, which can cause cancer, and basically, you know, bleeding from the inside from a distance. And they were basically beaming this at the American embassy in Moscow, and the American government basically thought, wow, this is a pretty nifty opportunity. We'll not tell anybody. What we'll do is we'll just see what happens, and then try and mimic this technology. And they took it back to America, and this became experimentation of people like Ross Addy and stuff like that. But so yeah, they were aware of that aspect of it. It's like any of these things, like you know, I'm sure there's a need to know basis for a lot of this things, and bizarrely, you know, you'll have seemingly high people in echelons like presidents perhaps that aren't privy to knowledge that perhaps generals or chiefs of staff, or you know, other people that might be access to this thing. I mean, when MK Ultra was actually long in the early 50s, when it was first initiated, there were only 2 people at any time that had a full knowledge of the program, and the decompartmentalization of it was you know, it's purposeful. It was so that people didn't understand exactly what was the sort of broader scope of the program. It had like 150 sub projects, each of them pretty monstrous in context, but like a lot of them, if you sort of took them on their own, they wouldn't particularly harmful to anybody. But you know, this is the way that the government works. This is the way that people are convinced to do for what is seemingly a cause that is
Great. All right, next question is Neil, what is the end game of mind control? What do they really want, and who really is they?
you know, well, I mean, that's the point. You know, as I say, mind control is quite a broad subject. It's not. You know, there are various elements of it. Every single domestic government is trying to control its citizens. That involves a degree of mind control. It involves people to be either terrified or satisfied to a degree, or reaching for satisfaction. Every government uses propaganda. Every of society uses propaganda. Christ, the British royal family is a fucking disgrace, and they managed to be beloved by a huge amount of people, basically, in a very similar way to a lot of the sort of politicians in America that have this sort of like almost messianic sort of like ability to draw people in on a cult of personality. You know, celebrities can be used in exactly the same way. The end goal of mind control is to have a citizenship, to quote George Carlin, or to paraphrase George Carlin, that's bright enough to get on with the daily grind, and stupid enough not to ask too many questions. And that's ultimately the end goal of mind control. It's like, I don't believe in this sort of one world conspiracy, one overarching conspiracy. There are concentric circles of power. There are people who are very, very powerful that work in very different systems to the way that the normal people would work, due to their money, ways that they can get around the world. But there's rivalries within this thing. It's not as simple as saying, "Ooh, it's the Illuminati. Ooh, it's the CIA." There's innumerate people that, you know, the world's a very, very complicated place, and there's a lot of people that have a lot of different aspirations, but at the same time there's a structure whereby rich people want to remain incredibly rich. The mind control thing as well, it's very, very well documented. like from the released MK Ultra papers to the medical papers of Ewan Cameron and William Sargent, to the George Estabrooks papers that he wrote about the use of hypnosis. Ross Addy wrote extensively in scientific papers about his use of microwave technology. Even recently, companies like Raytheon have proudly talked about their synthetic telepathy machines that can put thoughts into people's heads. So this is the point about this thing. This is an element of mind control as well. That this sounds like, oh, this is very silly, isn't it? It's all very science fiction, isn't it? Like, are you really saying that there are systems of control that people are distracting and lying to the people in order to basically keep them quiet? Yeah, yeah. And I've got the documentation to prove it. If you want to see it, like they're not shy about telling you about this if you actually want to go into it. But most people don't want to go into it because for two reasons. One, right? Why the hell would you? It's a very niche subject. And two, like, you've probably got better stuff to be getting on with. You've got a life to be getting on with. And the last thing you want is somebody coming up to you and telling you, yeah, this is a waste of your time, mate. This is a total waste of your time. Like, there are huge systems in place to ensure that you don't climb out of this crab bucket.
All right, yeah, great. All right, next question. Agent Spoofy, and it is, Neil, do you think that an idea as far as mass shootings or assassinations, for example, can be planted in someone's mind through speech or manipulation of the environment, causing said seed to grow and manifest into real life?
Right. I mean, in the case of something like a Sirhan or the assassination of John Lennon or school shootings or something like that, in a personal mind control, no, I don't think just by talking to somebody, like in the film Get Out, you can hypnotize them to do something like that. There are proven scientific experimentation by a number of different CIA doctors like Martin Orne, George Estabrooks, J.G. Watkins, Morse Allen, etc., that have proven and documented cases where hypnosis can be used in order to get somebody to act against their will and either murder somebody, murder themselves, plant a bomb, that type of thing. But there's a lot missing from these papers, and just the hypnosis on its own is not sufficient to do it. There are ways that you could essentially you could hypnotize somebody to believe that they were doing something mundane like shooting a water pistol. You could hypnotize somebody to believe that they're in a war situation, so that shooting somebody would be a moral act. You could convince them that you were so on their side that whatever you told them to do, there would be no negative consequence. So although it would appear that they're shooting somebody, trust me, that's okay. But there is also an element of trauma and something else that we don't know about there's the missing link into how this would be able to be manifested by. In regards to shootings and stuff like that, though, there is something which is called stochastic terrorism, which is essentially, the spreading of a very, very simplistic explanation of this would be a hate preacher that very directly talks to a crowd and basically says, you know what, your problem is this particular set of society, and somebody in that particular crowd goes out and commits a shooting or an atrocity. So in that sense, it could be done by the sense of stochastic terrorism, but that is again utilized in a far broader sense, and again often by governments and such like that, and by a lot of what's really weird is a lot of particularly in England, far right nationalist groups or seemingly far right nationalist groups that rally people up and go rah 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 rah. Two things: one, strangely, whatever their rhetoric is, it seems to mirror or support UK government foreign policy, which is strange for such a anti-establishment type group. And two, time and time again, these groups have been shown to be basically either completely infiltrated or the construction of intelligence agencies like Special Branch or MI5 or the police agencies within the UK, and even groups like Combat 18 and various other far right groups. Time and time again, this is shown. So that is spreading this stochastic terrorism, if you believe in such a thing. Is there a wider sort of conspiracy regarding I don't know, people like government intelligence agencies? Because basically, again, this supports government policy in some sense. It creates chaos in society. It creates fear in society. There have been proven examples of governments, committing terror acts against their own people in order to control society. Kurt Lewin, for example, who was and this is slightly different, but he was the head of the Tavistock Institute, which was a operation that was attached to the military and the government. And his raison d'etre essentially was the concept of inducing trauma from an exterior or a seemingly exterior point onto the civilized population en masse in order to create fear. Because when a population is in a state of fear, their reasoning capabilities reduce to the point where basically they very often go, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do," and they'll react to an authority figure and go, "Please help us," and at which point it's very easy to control large numbers of people.
All right, great. Next question comes from Wally, and the question is, Neil, you have wrote extensively on Charles Manson and the mind control the media employed on the public to keep the truth suppressed. Are there any modern day cases that are clear examples of legal witch hunts? And could you explain your background on the Charles Manson?
Well, I mean, just the Charles Manson thing, I'm just really quite interested in it, and because it's basically he's become an icon. He's transcended his crimes, which were essentially quite grubby crimes. I mean, that was many years ago when I sort of like got into Manson. I was quite surprised reading it. It's like, is that it? Is that I mean, it's horrible, that 7 people died, but basically he's like, oh, you get the impression that it was far more monstrous, and race war and Helter Skelter and this and that, and you think that's a bit crap, isn't it? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And then if you read a bit more into it, you start to find out about his connections to all different celebrities and the Beach Boys and his forays into Hollywood. And then if you read even more about it, you find about his homosexual liaisons with certain celebrities and selling drugs to certain celebrities and that type of thing. And it's just an incredibly fascinating case. And I've recently put out a book called "Now Is the Only Thing That's Real," which is of the Manson case. And there's essentially 4 different theories, or 4 main theories on Manson, which is the main theory proposed by Vincent Bugliosi, that he was a race war by an insane hippie cult leader. There's the Ed Sanders, Dave McGowan theory, which was basically it's a race war by an insane hippie cult leader that's attached to a satanic cult by the Process Church of Final Judgment. MK Ultra mind control idea, which was promoted by Mae Brussel and Adam Gorightly, and then there's the it was all a bit of a grubby robbery theory, which was promoted by Nicholas Schreck and William Scanlon Murphy. And what I've tried to do in this book is look at all these different theories and put it into a timeline of what actually Manson's life, and see which is more realistic. And basically, the more you sort of probe into this, particularly you find I've got the best detailed and accurate and realistic and plausible explanation for the case. I don't agree with all the aspects of both of their theories, but it looks more and more that basically it was a grubby little murder that was committed and would have exposed all these drug connections to various sort of elements of Hollywood. Actually, sort of basically just say what happened. They tried to first not solve the case by losing all the evidence. And then when they were forced into a position where they had to go sort of public with it, they created this nonsensical story, which then had to be bolstered by even more nonsensical witness testimony and more nonsensical ideology that was basically hammered into place by Vincent Bugliosi. And the reason for this was basically because all the main players were A, involved in Hollywood, B, involved in drugs, and C, had tangential connections to the mafia. And essentially, my theory falls in line with Nicholas Shepard, William Scanlon Murphy's theory that basically Manson got a bit of a bum rap. He's by no means a good guy, but he certainly wasn't a hippie cult leader. And the actual reasons for the murders were pretty mundane. Of this type of thing in modern day, yeah, this nearest one is Derek Bird. I mean, first off, you could look at things like, you know, the murder of John Lennon, the murder of Robert Kennedy, the murder of JFK. Obviously, I'm of the opinion that all of these things, I mean, I think that the first two that I mentioned were certainly involved mind control. But there's more recent cases like the Derek Bird case in England. The Madeleine McCann case is incredibly dodgy. I would suggest that everybody goes and looks up Richard D. Hall's documentaries on Madeleine McCann, who's a girl that went missing in England. Well, she's an English girl that went missing on holiday, or supposedly went missing on holiday. But there's a lot of evidence that suggests that basically her parents might have been, the girl might be dead, and her parents might know a lot more about this than they're letting on. Some strange reason, very high elements of the UK government got involved in this case in a way that is not a particular type of case. And again, I would just basically say for that particular one to go and look at Richard D. Hall's excellent documentaries on Madeleine McCann. There's all sorts of dodginess around the Yorkshire Ripper case. I'm not suggesting that the Yorkshire Ripper was innocent, but I don't think that he was responsible for all of his murders. There's in the Fred West and Rose West case, there's something that was incredibly strange about that. In Joseph Fritzl's case, for example, there was reports that basically local police were visiting this girl, that he was basically pimping this girl out, that his daughter that was hidden in the basement. The most sort of gruesome example of this would probably be the Marc Dutroux case, which you know, I probably don't have time to go into all the particulars now, but basically the gist of it is that it looks like he was running a paedophile ring that was stealing girls, using them for sex slaves that were going to various members of high society in Belgium and Belgian Parliament, and that he was supported by members of the Belgian police. And even when he was arrested, that the people that were involved in the arrest that were actually part of the cover-up. There's also the case of Paul Bonacci and the savings and loan scandal in Nebraska that was connected to. There's a child sex ring that was involved that for some reason I can't. Senator John DeCamp was the person that wrote about it, and for some reason I can't actually remember the particular name of it. It might well come back to me, but Paul Bonacci was one of the children that was involved in being pimped out and used for sex by Republican senators, and this was again proven in a court of law. We've had a recent spate of exposures of supposed and I believe to be real cases of paedophile rings ran through the British Parliament. A case of a brothel called Elm House that catered for young boys to be given to very, very sort of high level politicians and members of society. It's been admitted that the MI6 were using boys that were smuggled out of Kincora, which was a children's home, like an orphanage, and using them as rent boys to try and ensnare senior IRA members in honey trap type blackmail operations. There's Dolphin Square, which is a another example of a flat where paedophilia was being going on with UK Parliament members. The shooting of Mark Duggan and the murder of Smiley Culture, I think, are incredibly dodgy. I suspect they may well be linked to an exposure of drug dealing throughout the Metropolitan Police Force. I mean, God, like the history of drug abuse since the 70s in America is a litany of covered up crimes. Iran-Contra, like the interaction between the Shower Posse and the American government, the interaction between Los Zetas and the American government, Operation Fast and Furious, like the Freeway Ricky Ross and Harry O being supplied by, you know, Danilo Blandon, who had direct connections to the CIA, although he was supposedly a Nicaraguan cocaine smuggler. Like, yes, there are a number of covered up crimes. It is the short answer.
No, that's good.
About drugs and stuff like that. I've done various Rich Planet shows and stuff like that on YouTube. So just, you know, I've got things to back it up as well.
No, that's great. Next question is, let's see here. From Unlapped, the question is, Neil, if you had to write another book, what would it be about?
Chance, I've just finished one. Fucking hell! Like, I very possibly.
What was your most recent book about?
It literally came out a couple of months ago.
What was it about? I didn't ask when it came out.
It's about the Manson case, and basically, as I said in the previous answer, it's about, you know, examining the different possible theories as to what actually happened, and you know, basically, it's called Now Is the Only Thing That's Real: A Re-Examination of the Manson Murders, Motives, and Mythos, and it basically debunks. As I said, there are four theories, like the Vincent Bugliosi, the Ed Sanders, the Nicholas Schreck and William Scott Murphy, and the Mae Brussell. And it basically, what it does is it creates a timeline of events throughout Manson's life and appraises those particular theories against the actual physical evidence. I mean, one of the main things you find when you look at for example, if you look at the police report of the actual scene, it doesn't match the prosecution's narrative of the murders clearly taking place where people were being shot and stabbed to death around 4 a.m. It was proven by police reports. The police reported that basically gunshots and screams were heard at that time by numerous witnesses, and they were reported to the LA police force. The memory hold by the prosecution. An interesting fact about the Manson trial, it went on for over a year.
Right.
The defense, as long as it took to say the defense rests, defense presented in basically one of the most sensational trials in American history, which is absolutely astonishing. So many things that just don't add up in the Manson case, and so that's why I to write that book. Yeah, there's numerous other really good, but the other good book out there is Nicholas Schreck's book, and he's actually doing an updated version of that. It's called The Manson File, and that's incredibly detailed and a very good book. What I would perhaps do the book on next, I'm very interested in the influence of people like Robert Mercer and the utilization of J-Trig and Cambridge Analytica in the manipulation of everyone's going on about, like, did Russia manipulate the American election? But you know what? If they weren't trying to hack the American election, they weren't doing their job, because every major country hacks every other election, because they're all trying to piss around with each other's parliament and gain influence, because it's a massive chess game basically going on. So if Russia didn't try and influence the American election, I'll eat my hat. Involved in Trump with Trump, I don't know. I think they were probably involved in a very indirect way with Trump's main sponsor and main financier, which is a shady gentleman called Robert Mercer, who also owned Breitbart and is the main promoter and backer of Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway, the Mercer Foundation, and various other people. Interestingly, the alt-right and Richard Spencer are also financed by William Regnery III, who is a multi-millionaire who is behind the Martel group and the various other alt-right think tanks. So, you know, these about these particular movements that are appealing to a nationalistic fervor and also selling themselves on being of the people, for the people, by the people, are not of the people, for the people, or by the people. They're by billionaires and multimillionaires that have very, very, very dodgy ideologies, including like building an all-white utopia in America, but essentially give no shits about the general public. They're utilizing this again as a marketing campaign, as a tool to trick you. The element that I'm very interested in is Cambridge Analytica, which perhaps a lot of people don't know about. It's essentially Mercer got together with SCL and bought out SCL. SCL is a British military psychological warfare operations company that deals with British military warfare psychological operations, you know, manipulating public feeling and that type of thing. And basically, together with a company called Aggregate IQ in Canada, they manipulated the election of Brexit, and they manipulated the election of Donald Trump by buying people's Twitter, Facebook, and internet social media data, finding out what makes you tick, figuring out what makes you angry, and then micro-targeting you with campaign material that didn't appear to be campaign material, very much in the way that sort of Edward Bernays or Ivy Lee would have approved of. Secretive, underhanded micro-targeting, lies often in order to promote a line of thought, a particular candidate, or more likely to denigrate another candidate. There's a place in Macedonia, and this one particular town, there's about 18 major companies that started with money from America, and all they do all day is sit there and put out anti-Hillary Clinton, or conversely pro-Trump, false stories in order to bolster public opinion in one particular way. And this was not only proven but admitted to. Like, where the funding from this comes from is incredibly shady. But the suggestion was that it was again tied back to Robert Mercer. This is the point that about Trump, is that I don't think I think that, you know, I think it's a con job, man, for some people that want something else. I don't know what they want, but I guarantee that they'll make money out of it and it'll benefit them, and it probably won't benefit the majority of people. Now, the interesting point is that, again, the utilization of the internet, again, the hacking of people's social media and the playing up of, you know, with the tying with psychological programs that are put out by GCHQ, like JTRIG, like, you know, sock puppet accounts, fake grassroots account, just, you know, faking online campaigns, and the incredible use of bots that prevalent. This whole thing about fake news, for example, it's an information war, and this information war it's not who it is. There are factions, and the point of it is to create confusion. I mean, Trump is actually using it very well. I don't mean that in a positive sense. I mean that what he's doing is he's utilizing the concept of fake news like a dictator. What's interesting is the concept of fake news came from people like Breitbart that were basically printing bullshit like Hillary Clinton's got cannibal disease. This was being denounced before the election as fake news. After Trump is elected, he weaponizes the phrase and uses it to basically dismiss anything that doesn't tie in with his particular party line. You know, go, oh yeah, but come on, he's one of us. Bullshit. If that was happening in like in some third world country, if that was what was happening in Zimbabwe right now, you'd basically be rightly calling it out and saying, well, that's the actions of a dictator. That's somebody that wants to channel information to one specific line of thought and not encourage alternative. Oh, there we go, buzzing. Like, do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's mental.
All right, great answer. Next question is from Tech Question is, what are your views on subliminal advertising that was said to be used in movie theaters in the past, possibly commercials, so on and so forth?
Particular thing is a bit of a strange one. That's the James Vickery experiment, and basically it's that they flashed up for a fraction of a second, drink Coke, eat popcorn, and James Vickery reported that it had an increased sale. He later retracted this and said that he made the whole thing up. What's interesting though is that two things are interesting. One thing is that basically subliminal advertising is perfectly legal in America, and if you go on the internet, I'm sure you can find innumerable examples with hidden messages in advertising. Some of them are basically like jokes that have been put in by disgruntled employees, etc., etc. But some of them are, blatantly marketing techniques. And there have also been experiments done by very prestigious institutions like Harvard that show that subliminals have an effect on people. One particular experiment, they basically got people, two sets of people, doing very, very simple math problems on a computer, and they flashed up subliminally words. One of them got positive words, one of them got negative words. And it was proven in this experiment time and time again that if you flash up negative words, it sort of causes the brain to slow down. It basically befuddles the person, and it makes it far harder for them to complete even the most simple of tasks. So in that sense, it's been proven scientifically that subliminals actually do have an effect on people. Darren Brown does some very, very clever stuff on subliminals. The difficulty with Darren Brown is that you never know what's a trick and what's, for the cameras, and what's fabrication and that type of thing. But subliminals can be incredibly effective, and there are a number of studies that actually show this.
All right, great. Next question is from Fonzo, actually designated Lou, and it is MK Ultra still happening the same way in the past, or far more advanced now?
It'll be called something completely different. They changed it to MK Delta towards the end of the 70s, and then they basically officially shut the program down. What was strange was, I think it was William Casey was pressed by a reporter later than that, and asked if a program called Monarch, which is essentially prostitute mind controllers and sort of like honey trap sex dolls and that type of thing, whether that particular program was still going on. And the Director General basically said, no, we shut that down. Give a date, and it was a sort of a tacit admission that this particular program had gone on, when officially that was not a real program at that particular time. So when they say that they shredded all these documents in 1972, etc., or 1977, it's very, very, very difficult to say. I would imagine absolutely, because as I say, there was examples of the silent sound technology being used in the 90s, and a different type of mind control program being used against the people that were involved in the Waco siege. Basically, they used this Russian technique called the Smirnov technique. Well, they were going to use a technique called the Smirnov technique. This was basically what they were going to do. They got Charlton Heston to record a load of dialogue where he was going to pretend to be God, and he was going to speak directly to David Koresh and say, "Hey, David, come on out of the compound, not into the forbidden zone," and all that crap. But apparently they didn't decide to do this, and decided that it'd be far more sporting to set them on fire and machine gun them to death. But examples of mind control, like the QBARC document, specifically says that you should isolate and should overstimulate. This is exactly what they're doing to people in Guantanamo Bay and Camp X-Ray and various other places like that. When you see these people wearing goggles and oven gloves and stuff like that, they're using sensory deprivation, because for an extended period of time, this basically causes breakdown and psychosis. It causes a complete mental breakdown. It's a form of incredible torture, and they know this. What's interesting is that, again, the main principle put out by the QBARC document. The QBARC document is a torture manual that was based on the experiments of Ewan Cameron and William Sargent, which were two of the prevalent and prominent MK Ultra doctors. Says that in order to create a malleable state in society, or in a prisoner, or in a population, or whatever, you need to isolate them and you need to overstimulate them. And what I found was surprisingly interesting about that was the fact that basically that's exactly what Facebook does. And that's exactly what Twitter does. And that's exactly what talking on your mobile phone does. And that's exactly what multi-screening does. And it's exactly what being on a tablet pressed to your face 24 hours a day does. It isolates you and it overstimulates you. And again, time and time again, this is proven as being a very effective mechanism of military-industrial complex to prisoners of war malleable. I'm curious that this is the most popular thing in the world right now.
No, that's great. All right, so that's going to conclude this portion of the AMA. And Neil, if you sit, I'm going to drop you. Everybody's going to drop down to this other channel, and then everybody can talk to you for the second part. Cool?
Okay, cool.
All right, so you're good. I'll drop you down. Everybody drop down to the politics religion.
How
All
are you
right,
doing, Neil? You having a good day?
So, real quick, Wally, are you there?
Yeah, what's up?
All right, Wally's going to kind of lead this part. Neil, Wally, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Neil? Thanks for coming on. That was really cool. I enjoyed it. So I want to ask something that I think a lot of people are thinking. So from what I gather, I don't think you're really like a really capitalist or communist, but I know I've seen your lectures on marketing. Obviously, you know, companies and corporations, because of capitalism, it pushes them to, you know, use mind control on people. But does it affect how you think of capitalism as an economic system? Like, because I still think capitalism is a good economic system, even though, yeah, it does lead to, you know, extreme marketing schemes that are just designed to, you know, change the way people think. So what do you think about capitalism and communism? You there, Neil?
Neil, you there?
Yes, mate.
Did you hear that question?
Uh-oh.
You might be lagging a little bit. Neil, you there? Discord's been having some mini heart attacks. Hold on one sec.
No worries.
There you go. You there?
Cool,
Did you hear that question?
you, I'm afraid.
You didn't hear the question? I'm sorry, you're still breaking up.
You might have to move your computer just a little bit, Neil, to left or right, just a little bit.
Let me try that.
There we
Right.
go. I think you
can
hear
hear
me
you.
now.
Leonard.
Can you hear me, Neil?
Yeah, it's lighting up for him, but no voice.
Yeah. Do you want to disconnect and reconnect, Neil, real quick, or can you hear me? Yeah, I'm thinking you might need to disconnect and reconnect real quick. And then just click on that politics and religion chat like we did earlier.
Okay. All right, let me try this then.
Discord's trying to censor us.
Yep.
The government, man.
They don't want to know. They don't want us to know the truth.
They're mind controlling you. Maybe him leaving is a part of all the mind control.
He was dropping loads of buzzwords in that discussion. I'm kind of worried he's been activated as a sleeper agent.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Neil. You're still.
Can you hear us, Neil?
I think it might be a mic thing. No?
It was working good in there, and it was just as many people. You there, Neil?
I can hear you guys talking.
There you
Okay,
go.
now I can hear you now.
Ah, splendid.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear? Check. That is so weird that it just all of a sudden.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
hear you for a little, but you cut out at the end. So for some reason we hear you at the beginning, but then it
I can see him keying up. Have him leave the channel and come back. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, he just reset. He just did that. Can you hear Neil?
Yes, mate. Yes, mate. Yeah, I can hear you guys. Just
Okay, cool. All right. Hey, Tomo, chill with the fucking shitty ass keyboard. All right, Neil, you there?
Hey everyone, how you doing?
hold on, native.
Hold on, native. Neil, you there? It's going to be tough if we don't know you can hear your questions or not.
Neil, it looks like you're responding. Your circle is lighting up, but we're not hearing anything on our end, man.
Yeah.
Pretty good now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
Maybe try to speak up.
right. Perhaps I was a bit far away. There we go.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
get closer.
I think that was it. Yeah.
Like, don't deep throat it, because, I mean, I don't know which way you swing, but pretty close.
Is that good for you?
Yes. There you
Yes.
go.
Spectacular.
So did you hear the question? Or do I gotta...
Yep, get up on there. Not a dick, but kind of pretty close to one. Get up on there on it. Don't be afraid of it.
Couldn't
Get
hear
up
you
on
there.
that mic.
Just
Hey,
give
I'd
it
like
the
to
good
ask
old
you guys a
rap.
question. Is
Hold on,
it,
Eric.
this used to be Matt, right?
Oh my God, why?
Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whatever you're doing differently from what you were doing like 5 minutes ago, you need to not do. During the main AMA part.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Hello.
There you go. We heard that last hello, but you seem to be cutting out again.
Not sure if it was the first one or like the 13th one.
Yeah.
Still here. Hello.
Okay. Did you hear Waleed's question, Neil?
Can you repeat it to me?
Yeah, sure. I'll shorten it. So do you, in terms of capitalism versus communism, like economic systems, does the fact that capitalism leads to corporations, employing mind control on people to make them, think about certain brand names, want certain products, does this affect the way you think capitalism operates, like as an economic system? Like, are you more of a capitalist, communist, or how do you think that economy should be run by the government? If you could tie that into it.
Well, I mein, no, I mean, I'm a capitalist in as much as I live in a capitalist system and I have a job, and in that sense, both systems are flawed. Both systems can be manipulated. Both systems have been decried in ways that are not fair, and both systems have been decried in ways that are fair. I mean, what do you mean by communism, to be quite honest? Do you mean Leninism? Do you mean Marxism? Do you mean Maoism? Do you mean Stalinism? Do you mean socialism? Do you mean National Socialism, which obviously really isn't National Socialism, which is more a corporatism? The problem with any of these systems is that basically there are always people who are going to be at the top that are going to taste that power, that are going to enjoy that power, and they're not going to want to relinquish that power. I don't think that we've seen a perfect system of society, or if we have, I'm personally not aware of it. How would we sort that out? I don't know. It's difficult to come up with an alternative to Das Kapital at like 1:10 in the morning. But so I know I'm not the person to do it anyway. Yes, there is a connection between corporations and sort of overarching ruling of society, and it kind of mirrors the way that essentially the state overarches society in communism. It's just a different aspect of a tentacle, and the ultimately, again, my particular feeling is that both of these systems have positive aspects and negative aspects, but are ultimately manipulated in order to maintain the status quo.
All right, thank you. This is open for anyone to ask. So if anyone has a question for
Valency
me,
had
we can,
Valency had a good question I did want to hit on, which was where was it? In the here we go. What is your take on artificial intelligence, Neil, that self-learns and its threat on humanity?
The problem with a lot of these things is, again, that they basically use them for military functions. I mean, regarding I mean, it's always slightly concerning when you see like like whoever it was that put up that Google, I forget it was Google or Apple or whatever, put up like an AI personality online, and within about an hour it decided that it needed to destroy all humanity or whatever. But I don't know like quite how seriously to take that. What is, to me, is the military robots that you see, like these sort of like they're almost, again, they're like sort of hunter killer things. I mean, at the minute you've got things like drones, which are essentially sort of a military animal. You've got these sort of horses and snakes with cameras and stuff like that. You've got various other things that will eventually be used because basically they've been made. Like so,
about like Boston Dynamics.
All of that stuff, like, you know, I mean, what's really like disheartening about all that stuff is you see the suits, the endoskeleton type things that that they're making. That's an incredible sort of leap in technology. Why can we not use that for people that are like, you know, have been in accidents and stuff like that? Why is the first application of this always a military application? Well, and we know why this is, because basically it forwards foreign policy, it makes money, and you know, this is an ongoing cycle of how people keep control. I mean, but yes, kind of, but I'm not really an authority of it. But yeah, watching those mental sort of like robots that will hunt you down and kill you, and they're robots essentially. that is worrying.
Military is dominance.
Dominance.
All right. Does anyone else want to ask them? We gotta ask some more questions from the AMA.
I have a question. Do you think so what's your opinion on Alex Jones?
Well, I know it's very well. I think difficult to know whether it was like, because there's always been rumors that basically it was very, very suspicious that basically InfoWars started up in exactly the same city at exactly the same time Stratfor started up, and you know, later he had Stratfor staffers working for him in a very, very high capacity.
Was that InfoWars, or just him as like a personality, like radio and TV personality, starting up at the same time?
But I'd be lying if I didn't say that basically Alex Jones introduced me to a few things. Like, again, I don't agree with all of what he said, but some of his early documentaries, a lot of it's quite good. In the middle of all his bombastic shouting, like his 9/11 Road to Tyranny, and his one about the presidential election between Bush and I can't remember his name, but they were both in Skull and Bones, was very interesting. And then he seemed to sort of run out of steam and try to make things more and more sensational. I mean, he's always had a like some rubbish like tied in, like, and like all the stuff that he was doing on New Year's Eve at the Millennium, saying, "Oh, nuclear missiles have been launched" and stuff like that. So it's difficult. But most recently, I personally have the opinion that he's become a voice a voice box for the government. And by the government, I mean President Donald Trump. And like a lot of people say, yeah, but it's Donald Trump. He's against the government. He's not against the government. If you believe anything that Alex Jones has said for the last God knows how many years, right? Okay, the government could not get into the seat of president, right? Okay, and I don't believe that he's against the government anyway. I find it very curious, and this is probably slanderous, but that basically Alex Jones seemed to get a massive boost of money about the time that he was going through an incredibly expensive divorce, and his production values went through the roof. And that he seemed to change his tactic and renounce his past sort of Muslim terrorists being sort of like CIA sponsored or false flags or that type of thing, and to basically just promote right-wing government propaganda as alt media, very, very thinly disguised as alt media. And Paul Joseph Watson is another of these sniveling, whinging arseholes that's basically just like gone back on any sort of like credibility he had as a sort of interesting and decent journalist of alternative facts to just peddle lies and pretend to be Ann Coulter for money. Because I assume that they make quite a lot of money off YouTube and selling their penis enhancing pills or whatever they sell, and all this, and it's pretty sad. Like, do you know what I mean? Because like, he's always been a showman. He's always been a bit of a twat, right? Okay. But there was a lot of interesting stuff that was in there, and they've just taken a really, really obvious style. Let's replace Glenn Beck and try and appeal to a broader demographic. I'm not a fan anymore.
So you're saying like basically he went from a legitimate or quasi-legitimate.
Legitimate. I think he was always like bad for it, but I think he was like, you know, he had some interesting. He provoked some very interesting questions and found some very interesting things out. But I think that whether he's become jaded or
just wants money,
yeah, or whatever, who knows? But there was a distinct turn in his output. His memory hold a lot of his past. He changed the format of his website. You can't find a lot of his old stuff on his website anymore. And you know, again, like by sheer coincidence, this seemed to coincide with two things, like the fallout from his divorce and the advent of Donald Trump. Now, I mean, I'm just spitballing, but like,
don't you think that Donald Trump, as he rose to power, that whole like, I don't know, crazy like conspiracy theory nut kind of like ethos kind of also rose at the same time?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of tying in with it, because I basically think he saw that as a useful demographic. He made a lot of overtures to 9/11 Truth and
exactly
various other things, and there's a contentious but again somewhat interesting documentary called Clinton Chronicles, and the Clinton family are very, very dodgy. Not every accusation that's leveled against them is accurate, but you know, Whitewater, Monica Lewinsky, Mena, Arkansas airstrip, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of strangeness going on there, and he appealed to that in a very, very media savvy way. Without he seemed to promise a lot, and if you actually go back and listen to what he said, he didn't promise anything, and he delivered on his promise. Anything. You know, but absolutely, there was a rise. I mean, I'll tell you exactly why I think there was a rise as well, because basically, I think it's connected to Robert Mercer. Robert Mercer promoted Breitbart, and off the back of this, I think there's a huge new node of sort of self-feeding, supposedly alternative media sites that are out there that are essentially just pumping material. And alt-right material, I know people might not want to hear this, but it's pro-government propaganda disguised as appealing to the everyman. Again, it's a tried and tested propaganda technique. It's been done again and again and again, and it just so happens that everything that comes out of it just so happens to fall directly in line with government foreign policy. You know, it's bullshit essentially. But yes, so there was a rise of that, and there's also a rise of like complete false made up sites like Neon Nettle and Your Newswire and like various other ones that just basically just make stories up. Talking about like stories about like, you know, suspected paedophile rings, the suicide of people, or anything like that, right? Okay, if you're making a story up just to make money, you're a cunt. You're a despicable fucking cunt, and there's just nothing else to say about that. It's just absolutely the worst. Well, it's not the worst thing you can do, but it's.
Sorry to interrupt, but what is the topic? Are you talking about news, or are you talking about like people coming out claiming sexual assault?
We're in the middle of a AMA.
About making up like these supposed alternative news outlets like Neon Nettle and stuff like that basically make up false stories, pumping out disinformation, making money off lies, and basically it's terrible in two ways. One, because basically, you know, it's just you lie, and two, because if there's any of salience to any of these types of things, you're causing disinformation and sullying the water. You're lying about dead people and stuff like that. There's a lot of shit on the internet at the minute, basically.
So do you? I want to know why you think it's really wrong for corporations to take advantage of, you know, the natural processes that happen in the human brain, that, like, you know, mind control, taking advantage, you know, using music, using certain colors, things that are already programmed into your brain. I mean, is it really wrong to take advantage of that? Because unless people don't have those brain functions, I don't really see any other way of it to go.
That you know, it's an interesting point. Where do you make the distinction? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, basically, you know, if you smile at somebody and keep using their name, harm them, you're using a mind control technique. So you're absolutely right. Where do you draw the line? I think where it becomes a problem is where it's behavior or influencing decision making to an extent that is detrimental to people. And again, to be quite honest, there's an argument with that as well. Like, you know, should fast food restaurants be allowed to use primary colors? Because primary colors appeal to you on a very instinctive nature, and they appeal to children. They're the best colors to use to draw people in off the street. Should they be allowed to do that? Because that's not good for you. Or should you be allowed to make that decision? It's a very, very difficult argument. I'd probably fall down on the line of, look, you know, if you what, it's really a moot point if people know these techniques. It doesn't mean, like, I'm not impervious to all this. Like, I eat more crap and fast food than is healthy. But for example, it's like a magic trick. If you know that basically, you know, oh, she's not sawing off, she's got her legs tucked up, it somehow takes away the wonder of it, or it takes away the stultifying effect of the. That might be something you could do.
Thanks. Anyone else want to ask something?
Yeah, so I took that political compass test, and I posted in voice chat links.
All right,
So
hold on. Just keep related to the AMA, guys.
Yeah, it's an AMA, guys. We ask questions about what relating to the topic, but I do have a question. So, you know, you saw in Obama's campaign, Neil, you know, there's kind of the start of successfully using social media and maybe some form of quote unquote mind control, if you will. You know, do you think Trump did what he did as well, or do you think he, you know, made it even bigger and used all kinds of different, you know, techniques? And what techniques do you think he used?
I mean, the admitted technique that they used was through Cambridge Analytica, which basically, again, one of a better phrase, they attacked people with micro-targeted lies. They again, what they did was they bought all your data, and this was now here's the thing, right? Okay, SCL and Cambridge Analytica are connected to the Pentagon, the White House now, the US Marines, Marconi Defense Systems, and UK intelligence and UK British military psychological operations, right? Okay. Anybody that is connected to that type of operation is not a man of the people. You cannot be a man of the people and have that on your side. This is just a different strain of people wanting the power behind the seat of government. But essentially what they did was they bought all your data on Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, all this crap basically, and they mined it. They looked through, saw what you liked, saw what you disliked, saw what your comments said, and figured out this person really hates this person really hates that. And so to make it really, really simple, they found out that you really, really had an aversion to foreign cars, then all of a sudden you'd get bombarded on your Facebook and Twitter feed with stories and reports and sock puppet accounts telling you that the candidate that they didn't want you to vote for, which in this case was Hillary Clinton, was a massive fan of foreign cars. That's a really, really, really sort of simplistic example of what they did, but that is admitted. They admitted to doing that. And in fact, they were quite proud of it. They've since tried to downplay the effect of this, but they certainly did that. I also strongly believe that a lot of the provenly false. I mean, again, I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton. Just because I'm not a fan of Donald Trump doesn't mean I'm a fan of Hillary Clinton. They were all despicable, but a lot of the false stories that were spread about Hillary Clinton, I would be amazed if they weren't spread by a node of the Trump campaign. As we said, they had that there was that particular town in Macedonia that was dedicated to spreading that type of story. So I'd be astonished if there wasn't more things that went on as well. That doesn't mean that there wasn't dirty tricks on both sides. It's just that that's the one that I happen to know about.
I posted a link to the CEO of Cambridge Analytica describing how it works in the voice chat messages.
Cool.
Yes, man. Like, yeah, they're shady. I mean, they're involved. Basically, they're denying involvement in the Brexit vote, but they're a bit kind of sort of stumped because initially they boasted about it, and nothing will get done of it because essentially what they did was they took all the data and did all the processing in Canada, and by some bizarre loophole in the law, because that's not in Europe, it can't be investigated properly by the British electorate. So you know, there's all sorts of dodginess. But again, when this is so heavily sold as a revolution, for want of a better word, of the people, and this is going to be a way to take our country back, or you know, make America great again, or whatever. And you look at the people behind it, and it's the same shifty sods that are behind everybody else. You know, the Steve Bannon's had involvement with the Koch brothers and Goldman Sachs. Donald Trump is mafiaed up to his tits. It's ridiculous. Like again, it's a very well sold marketing campaign, I think. But I'm still of the opinion it's a marketing campaign.
Cool. Anyone else? Doobie, did you want to ask something? Or was that? Go for it.
Oh, sorry, Doobie.
No. You can ask. Yeah.
Doobie's not even in here. Oh, okay,
yeah. No. I'm sorry. He just DM'd me. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, you were speaking about Manson. I didn't get to hear the whole AMA, so sorry if you've already covered this. But how do you feel about the suspicions and reports of the whole Laurel Canyon, Timothy Leary, CIA LSD thing that was going on, and the relation to Manson's release from jail during that time period? Anything that might have to do with a connection between them?
Only tangentially. I'll have to admit that initially, like a long time ago, I did believe that they were very heavily connected because I tended to believe the Ed Sanders and the family and the connection to the Process Church. But since then, I've discovered that basically that was really an invention by the Church of Scientology, who had promoted that particular connection via the English tabloid newspapers, when it was discovered that Manson actually had a connection, or a tangential or a vague connection, to the Church of Scientology. I was also sort of like taken by the fact that they often mentioned Orange Sunshine, which was basically a particular brand of Owsley Stanley LSD that was hawked around by the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, and at least one, possibly more, members of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love were proven in courts of law to be, particularly Ronald Stark was proven to be CIA operatives. So I thought that was pretty damning. The more I sort of looked into the Manson case, to be honest, I felt that the concept of him being an LSD type cult guru and a mind control leader, false. I thought that essentially he was a pimp. I felt he was a petty criminal, a drug dealer, and probably, almost certainly, I felt he was a pimp, which is why he exerted the control and the influence that he did. I'm also now of the belief that in line with Nicholas Schreck and William Scallon Murphy, that essentially he was a scapegoat for the crimes. He was, again, connected to the crimes and probably witnessed to at least 2 of the murders, but certainly did not order them, certainly didn't believe, I don't think, in the helter-skelter idea, and I don't think he was a mind control cult leader. I think that in connection to MK Ultra, because MK Ultra was a social program as well as like an individual program, I think that how Manson was used by MK Ultra was through the promotion of Manson as a political activist by the Weather Underground, and particularly Bernardine Van Doren, who declared 1969 as the year of the fork and said that Manson was a revolutionary. And this was about the same time that the Weather Underground was breaking away from the SDS. It was exactly the same time that they were breaking away from the SDS and decided to go on an anonymous campaign of domestic terrorism. Now, what my belief in that aspect is twofold. One, I believe that the Weather Underground was infiltrated or basically set up by the CIA to demonize the SDS and to also demonize the Revolutionary Action Movement and the Black Panthers and any other leftist activists, in a similar way to the way that the Black Bloc have been used in the past to demonize anti-capitalist protesters. And I also believe that basically after the fact, that initially the Manson case, they didn't want to solve it. The LAPD and the LA County Sheriffs lost evidence. They didn't follow up leads. They were basically almost blackmailed into making arrests on the case. And then essentially they concocted a story in order to fit this ludicrous narrative that they had to sort of follow. But what I think that the government did was basically, when presented with lemons, they made lemonade. Through the speeches of Bernardine Van Doren, they utilized the concept of Manson as a hippie and as a commune leader and as a representative of the anti-war movement or the youth movement or whatever you want to call it, and used his image to basically declare that this was violent and anti-American, and to tar everybody that had long hair with that same brush.
Cool. I appreciate the answer, man.
So, how much do you employ mind control in your own speeches, like with the certain gestures you make, or the way you speak, or how you do certain things? Like, obviously, knowing about it, you'll just, speak in a certain way that's just more persuasive, I assume.
That's awesome.
I try to be polite, and I mean, I don't really I haven't practiced talking. The only way I've been told to talk is, imagine you're talking to your most intelligent friend. That's it. I mean, I am actually a practicing and registered hypnotherapist, but smattering of NLP, but nothing in order to do Jedi mind tricks or anything like that. I'll put it this way, man. Okay, if I could do that sort of thing, I hate to admit it, but I'd be in the Bahamas right now making some scantily clad girl pay for my 15th drink. So,
All right.
You're there right now doing that?
yeah, I wish.
You wish? Nice.
Here on, and it's a very, very, very cold and gloomy England November.
That's unfortunate. All right. Well, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in here?
Yeah, quick question. So this question is from Valency. Do you think mind control can be used in a utility way, aka for the greater good, and can it be morally good?
Now that's an interesting point. Can because the concept of mind control, again, it depends how broad you want to be. But what we'll say is, like, changing somebody's opinion could, of course, change somebody's opinion for the good. Utilization of condoms to prevent AIDS, for example, knowledge of education programs, anything like that. That the things can, of course, be promoted and pumped into the zeitgeist of the public psyche in a positive way. There is an argument regarding morals as to, and can anything be moral if the person does not know what they're getting into? Again, in essence, you could use mind control weapons to non-violently stop crimes, wars, that type of thing. It has been done. Whether that's a moral act it's really complicated, because then you that very much depends on whether you think the act of war or that particular war is moral in the first place, etc., etc. These are all tools, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? What could be moral? If I could mind control one person to assassinate, right? If I could somehow get in there and mind control Goebbels to get next to Hitler and blow them both up, okay, would that be moral? In theory. Is it moral to make an army without firing a shot? It stopped bloodshed, but who was right in the first place?
Right.
In essence, these things are tools. I imagine there are scenarios where you could think of a moralistic use for them, but the very fact that they exist is a very, very shady ground anyway, basically.
So I have a question. Has any of what you've contributed presented actual neuroscience research or actual science to confirm these methods and techniques?
There's a lot. I mean, it depends which. I mean, the thing is, in my book, there's references to all the footnotes. A lot of what I talk about comes from declassified military experiments, and they have the full case studies in a lot of them. A lot of the stuff that I talk about is stuff that comes from scientific journals where companies are boasting about advances that they've made, or from so textbooks and stuff like that, whereby basically they have referenced studies that prove. I'll give you an idea, right, of one. I mean, this is slightly different, but there were studies done that basically Pepsi, which is better, right? Okay, it turns out in blindfold tests, nobody can tell the difference. Even basically like hardcore 20-a-day addicts or whatever can't really tell the difference in complete blindfold, double-blind tests. But what's strange is that basically people were convinced that the drink tasted nicer if it came in a Coca-Cola cup, not a Pepsi cup, a Coca-Cola cup. What does that indicate? That indicates that basically Coca-Cola's marketing is stronger. People expected to get a better experience because the marketing was stronger. Furthermore, basically what they did was they pumped like a clear liquid water essentially into people's mouths, and put them in like a sensory deprivation tank. They found that basically following people's brainwave patterns, if they flashed up Coca-Cola marketing, again, brains responded in a very, very different way. They responded as if they were in the pleasure centers, which basically showed that marketing is so strong that it can alter our sensory perception of reality. It's been also been shown, again, this is not really connected to say Manchurian type candidates, but again, that was all in MK Ultra, and then companies like Raytheon and various other people that have published papers on this, and all the doctors that have been involved in it talking about they've been involved in. So there is documentation.
Hey, real quick, guys.
iPhone elicits a response in people. The ringtone in the iPhone elicits a response in people,
Neil, real quick,
identically akin to seeing a loved one.
Neil, real quick, guys.
It's an almost quasi, and I mean, like a lover, not a family member.
Neil,
because of the lifestyle that the product promises.
Can you hear Ask Neil? He's trying to talk to you.
Oh, sorry. No, I can't.
All right. Hey, I'm gonna post Neil. Neil, can you hear me?
But I can't hear you, man.
You can't. Can anybody else hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Okay.
Maybe that's the issue we were having. He didn't hear me the whole time before.
No, I think here.
Okay, well, hey, Wally, tell him that I'm posting, remind everybody I'm posting his Amazon link to the book and his website again in voice chat links, and then let him keep going.
All right, Neil. So we're just gonna remind everyone that we're gonna give one more shout out to give a link to your book and to your website in the announcements, and you can continue. So we just wanted to let everyone know.
You bet. That's very kind of you.
Philosophist, you wanted to say something, I think, right?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like, so in that experiment, right? You're basically you're not quite doing an experiment where you do something causal and then you check at the end what the results are, like nothing controlled anyway, right? Where you're saying this is a way to test, like do a pH test of which of the brands is doing better in the market so far, but there's no way to really link that into what specific things that the like that Coca-Cola is doing per se as compared to Pepsi, and then maybe try that across different brands and different
no, that's exactly
the products, right?
Basically did it with those two, but they certainly did it with brainwave activity, and that again, that was just one example. But yeah, you know, like this is the point. What I there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of crap on the internet. So you know, if I don't know that something is real, or that there's not an experiment to back it up, I'll say this is speculation. Like, but in those particular cases, there was, say, in the mind control field, there was loads of field tests, there's loads of stuff.
Right, so in that particular, sorry,
No.
in that particular case, there's no result that you would even have as an option, right? That showed you that there wasn't an effect of minds being controlled, right?
Well,
there's the outcome of either Pepsi was better or Coke was better, and you interpret that as
You've
being
misunderstood.
mind control work for one of them.
A question of what was better. It was a question of basically it elicited a physical and physiological response in the brain when and it was tested against numerous controls when all that was flashed up was the marketing campaign, like literally the colors or the brand identity of Coca-Cola, and it was only on Coca-Cola's particular brand that it elicited these responses. These responses were the interpretation of the brain, a pleasurable response than reality actually dictated. So there was a physiological, scientifically proven fact set against variables and controls that showed that different types of marketing can actually affect how we perceive reality.
Okay, I'd be curious to know what kind of controls were actually instituted.
It's in the footnotes, and then follow the footnotes, and you can find out, man.
Coca-Cola does have some crazy marketing.
Uh-huh.
Look at Santa Claus. Santa Claus was basically created by Coca-Cola.
I mean,
Or at least the modern image of him.
certainly very tied into him. Yeah, certainly. Like, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But this is the point. It's about putting things into your consciousness. This is the point. Coca-Cola is now associated with Christmas, as you quite rightly say. I mean, if
It totally
anything,
is.
it's a summer drink. Like, you know, you have it cold.
The other day I was thinking, oh, it's Christmas time. I can't wait to get some cinnamon Coca-Cola. And I was like, damn, it's so true.
Called imprinting, basically. It's a technique. Clotaire Rapet talks about it. For example, for example, like with some coffee, not really selling the coffee per se. They're selling a memory, or for, like, you know, breakfast with your mum, breakfast with your wife, that type of thing. That this is something that is imprinted by a connection. In this sense, an olfactory connection to the smell that they will overemphasize in the marketing. And again, it's called imprinting. It's these in essence, it's subliminal. It's a way to connect certain things together in a way that is not initially apparent to the consumer, in order to, manipulate their decision making.
Anyone else? It's open chat, guys. Just letting you know.
I'm gonna have to wind it up quite soon, I'm afraid, mate.
Yeah, no problem.
It's like 10 to 1 here, so 10 to 2 here. Sorry.
Oh well, thank you for coming on after and talking to us directly. Even though it's so late.
Nice to do it again, man. Like, it was a lot of fun. It's just I'm gonna have to wind it up soon. I could do a couple more questions.
Sure. If anyone else isn't gonna jump in, anyone else want to say something?
Well, I mean, I guess I just wanted to say, like, I'm trying to get involved in neuroscience research personally, and so to some extent, it sounds like what you're talking about are things that have been vaguely indicated as, like, indicating some nature of the mind that is worth speculation and inquiry. But as far as, like, a hard science approach to controlling people's opinions, I don't know. It seems like it's very difficult. It would be very difficult to demonstrate.
Because well, no, it's not difficult to demonstrate. It's just whether you take that that demonstration as accurate. There's numerous social control experiments and psychological studies about influencing behavior that you can go to. It's whether you would take that as a specifically, if you want a neuroscientific responses. I suppose that you could go and look for them. The things that I would say in these experiments is look at the results. The results have shown that this is the input, this is the safety, this is the variable, this is the result that's shown. And which depends. I mean, if you're talking about mind, are we talking about physical mind? Are we talking about the manipulation of the conscious? Where is the conscious? What is the mind? Are we talking about manipulation of the brain? I can show you documentary evidence of stimulus receivers, electronic stimulation of the brain, implants that were done by Delgado, Puharich, psychotronic weaponry that was the implants brainwave patterns onto people that was done by Ross Addy, that has a neuroscientific response mechanism that is proven and shown in the actual documentation. So I can show you that if you want. But it depends exactly on what concept of mind control that you're talking about. If you're talking about a physiological response in the control of, say, mass herds or behaviors, we don't know, because we don't know where the mind is, and we don't know whether there is a physiological response to, say, manipulation of personality, creation of personality. Where is the personality? Can you cut the personality out? You may know the answers to that, and I don't know. But again, this is very much dependent on your frame of reference. But I can tell you definitely that, like, there is scientific data to back an incredible amount of this up. And I'll say, yeah, this is speculation, but this indicates this.
Yeah, that's really where I was going. Is that there is still this sort of vague area to consider. I don't know about the brain waves. The brainwave, like if you're putting somehow brainwaves onto people's brains,
yeah,
like if that's supposedly a means of mind control, it's a very easy thing to test ultimately, where it's like you do this effect, you do this action, and you look for the effect that you predict to occur, right?
Do you mean
And
like
that's how science has to go. Say again?
I mean, they were confident enough to use it in Battlefield, so
that doesn't really tell me whether or not they actually found sufficient results.
Do you mean like what they do in behavioral therapy?
Well, I mean, just anything. We're trying to understand how to affect the brain, right? To affect people's thoughts, what have you. There's always been a conflict of having a difficult time knowing that what you did had an effect on the outcome. With enough tests, with enough control, you can definitely do that, but it's still so far results have been pretty big. Now, in more recent technology that's available, like we have electrodes that can actually monitor brain patterns. So there is the potential for further study to be more exacting and say, we did this and that was the response, and then we can trace and map the brain more clearly than previous research has been able to do.
Oh yeah, no, that's certainly true, absolutely. But you've got to agree though to an element as well. It's not like they're going to, the majority of, for example, the MK Ultra declassified documents were declassified by mistake, and it was only through a Freedom of Information Act request that they weren't destroyed. These are clandestine technologies and such. So you are piecing it together. And so you're absolutely right. Of course, if this is to an extent best guess territory, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There is emergent technology that can map this more, and hopefully this will yield more.
Because in the most vaguest sense, you could just as soon say that if you threw a stink bomb into the middle of a crowd and people would scatter and call that mind control, right? It's really a question of like.
The beginning is it's a very broad topic, and it very much depends on what you want to do. You could, but what you could also do is show an experiment where it wasn't a stink bomb; it was something that affected their lower frequencies by emission of a microwave or something like that. Where I would say that is controlled psychotronic mind control. What you're saying there, I would say, of course, that is mind control in the more syntactic sense. What it is, mind control, is because we have an affliction to foul smells. And interestingly, there are foul smell bombs in warfare that are used to non-violently distribute people, which are attached to programs that are broadly connected to what could be called mind control. Would I say that that was mind control in the sense of a Manchurian candidate? No, I'd say that's a fucking stink bomb, right? Okay, but that's not what I'm saying, is it, man?
Yeah, I'm just thinking to get to that next step, you need something more clear as the result, right? And well, not even like I guess if you have a psychotronic device, right, and you're aiming it in the center of a crowd, and you watch that crowd for no reason that it is understanding, be dispersing from where you're targeting it, then that would be a pretty clear result, right? But the kind of results we're talking about aren't so
would you say that if you
clear
could
in
stop a ball
that
that was
sense.
charging at you, like that would be a clear result?
Say again.
That was charging at you.
You're still
Like,
cutting out. Say it
okay.
one more time.
bull that was charging at you time and time again in recorded controlled experiments simply by one action will, would you suggest that that was an indication that it worked?
What's the influence? Like, what is the thing that is stimulating the bull charging?
Well, the thing that's stimulating the bull charging is that they pissed this bull off, and then basically, Lombardo in the early '60s had implemented a physical device called the Stymoceiver, and basically this was initially what it did was it physically just locked up muscles so that basically it could not respond. So this was a physical response. Later, they moved it to the neurotransmitters of the brain, so that basically by the time they were doing the filmed experiments in the early mid 60s, it was a brain response that was actually seizing this bull up. So there was no damage to the actual physicality of the bull, other than the cramping of the muscles. This later expanded to a technology where the Stymoceiver got microscopic, and the transmitter for this was about 3 miles. And just by these particular implants, they could remote control specific various actions of of not only bulls but various animals. This was later continued in a project called Project 62. And again, this was basically an increasingly sophisticated manipulation of physical manipulation through mind implants that would, again, physically affect or mentally or emotionally affect not only animals but the people that they also experimented on. So, you know,
from implants, you said?
But again, there was loads and loads and loads of different techniques. There was different waves that were used. There was different types of implants. There was different sort of these waves, for want of a better expression, at people. There was different ways of hiding signals in sound. There were different, you know, things like that. There was a whole plethora of experimentation that was going on, not only in the 50s and 60s, but again, a lot of it was basically contracted out to weapons manufacturers, and it's now sort of crowd control or prison control and that type of thing. Yeah, I mean, that runs a whole gamut from the same physical to inductions of nausea, inductions of feelings of terror or worthlessness, voices in people's heads through synthetic telepathy, stuff like that. So yeah, you know, I mean, I don't entirely know what it is that you're after, but I'm pretty sure if you want to look, it's there. I'm not quite sure what your yardstick is. It's particularly high.
So I've been trying to read up on brain machine interfaces of late, and it just seems like a lot of what you're suggesting has been experimented in the 50s and 60s. If it was successful, would be well, our technology would be 10 times what it is now.
Right? Why? Because it was clandestine in the 50s and 60s. Why don't you think? Why do you think it would be public knowledge now?
Well, it doesn't matter if it's public knowledge per se, right? Like, I'm just saying, we have a lot of information, a lot of data that is looked into on a regular basis for the sake of trying to understand the brain, for the sake of neuroscience. And the conclusion so far as I understand from the scientists that do the public studies, is that these are that we are still fairly limited in what we can be able to induce and also record from the brain as a whole. So it just does seem to me like, if we're talking about some psychotronic waves or sound waves even, and it goes beyond the pale of what would seem like magic compared to the technology that I've been reading up on, it's really hard to follow the idea that that's plausible.
I'm not an expert in the technology. I'm an expert in the data, and the data indicates that it was real, it was used, and as you quite rightly say, it probably indicates that they're a lot more advanced now. But that doesn't mean that they're going to put all that out into the mainstream, or if somebody publishes it in the mainstream, that they won't have some sort of control of that information because they might feel that it was detrimental to national security, for example. There's numerous examples of experiments that basically were later came out because, again, they were seized by military because for whatever purpose. So, it depends very much on what you want to believe, doesn't it, man? You don't have the actual physical proof of a paper saying like this happened. I don't think you would get that, to be quite honest. Like, so, but there's enough murder, really. Like, someone doesn't necessarily have to confess for you to have enough evidence for you to, beyond reasonable doubt, say shit that they're messing with. And maybe you're right. Maybe they just knocked it on the head in the 60s. Or maybe they plateaued. Didn't realize that basically their investigations had gone past their particular technology, and they still haven't caught up to it.
Or what about just this possibility, or at least this this point of fact? Would you deny that there has been significant amounts of pseudoscience from that era and even up to this day, right? Where people really just do little magic tricks or fudge the numbers to seem more relevant than they really are.
No, dude, there's shed loads of that in the MK Ultra as well.
You can't hear you, cut out.
Of that in say MK Ultra documentation as well. But you know what? I didn't talk about those ones. Like, I talked about the ones with repeated controlled tests that showed the same result over and over again. And because I was only on for an hour, I basically gave you the edited highlights. I could sit here and go through God knows how. I'm not gonna, because I'm going to bed in a minute. But I could go through all the backstory and stuff like that. Please investigate it. If you don't think it's plausible, that's fine. Fair enough. Whatever. I don't care.
Is the Earth flat?
Anyway, so yeah, so thanks for that. I'm curious enough to keep an open ear in the ether about any and all techniques that have been experimented in the past. It's just yeah, I mean, the stuff that's going on now is pretty awesome in and of itself. And I would even go so far as to say, like, there's a lot of it has stemmed from research that was significant in 1995. This is a question of, like, I don't know. It's just how like when we have. So I'm happy with appreciating something when I have evidence to suggest its reality. It's really just up until that point. I'm not sure if really belief matters one way or another to me.
1995 is when Bill Clinton, in a congressional hearing, or I forget the exact terminology, but in an official government hearing, apologized to victims of mind control experimentation, including people like Christine D. Nicola and various other people who were not only sort of to various forms of mind control, torture, and various other types of things, but were also essentially trained to be young prostitutes for honey trap operations. These were girls who was as young as 9, and this has been mirrored by the admissions of MI5 and MI6 in the UK, who was again taking boys in this instance, and girls actually, out of orphanages to be used in very similar programs. So, this is the thing that on a parliamentary manifesto fact.
Hey Neil, you still there? Hey Neil, you still there?
I am, dude. Can you
All
hear
right,
me?
cut out. There you go.
Ah, off though, dude, because it's like after 2 here. Fun as
All
it's
right.
been.
Yeah, so here, thank you so much for the AMA, and you're always welcome to come back and just hop in whenever when we're debating and
It
we're
was really
hanging
fun,
out.
actually. And thank you to all the people that asked me questions. Crikey, a lot more hard pressing than I expected. So salute to you guys.
Yeah, great,
thanks for
man.
that.
Yeah, thanks for taking them, and thanks for taking your time out of your day and your night especially. So thanks. Hopefully, we'll see you again.
Man.
All right, thank you.